Jonathan Swift's life. And so at this point, we'll be moving on to the plot of Gulliver's Travels and the overview of it. I'm just going to hit the high points. We're gonna work through it as far as what's going on and why it's significant, and we're going to keep moving. So Gulliver's Travels recounts the story of Lemuel Gulliver, or I never pronounce his name correctly. He's a practical-minded Englishman. He's trained as a surgeon, and he takes to the sea because his business has failed. How does your business fail as a surgeon? Apparently, you're bad at it, right? His adventure in Lilliput with the Lilliputian begins when he wakes up after a shipwreck. He finds himself bound by innumerable tiny threads, right? You guys have all seen the pictures of Gulliver being tied down. That's probably one of the most ubiquitous images of Gulliver's Travels, is him being kind of put down, held down by the Lilliputians. And he's being addressed by his captors, who are in awe of him, but very protective of their kingdom. So overall, they're hospitable, right? They risk famine in their own land by feeding Gulliver, who consumes more food than 1,000 Lilliputians combined could, because he's a grown man and these little 6-inch creatures. He's presented to their emperor, and Gulliver, right, is flattered because he is receiving the attention of royalty, right? It doesn't matter that it's a bunch of 6-inch tall people. He's flattered by being able to have audience with royalty. So eventually, he becomes a national resource. He's used by the army in its war against the people of Blefuscu, and which I talked about their differences in the way they crack eggs and whatnot. But Gulliver is then convicted of treason, right, for putting out a fire in the royal palace with his urine. There's a lot of peeing in this book, by the way, and is condemned to be shot in the eyes and starved to death, right, by the Blefuscu people. But he escapes. He's able to repair a boat, and he sets sail for England, right? After staying in England for about 2 months with his wife and his family, he takes off on another sea voyage because he's just restless, and it takes him to the land of the giants called the Brobdingnagians. Gulliver's repulsed by these people, their huge size, all that stuff I talked about, the torrential sound of their urination, all that, and by their ignorance, right? He's a well-educated man. He despises ignorance, right? So they're just completely, even their rulers are uneducated about the ways of government, right? So and so they become an aristocracy, representative of the aristocracy, and that is Swift's commentary on the aristocracy. That just because you're born to a certain family doesn't mean that you should lead, that you're a natural born leader, or that you should be placed in a position of authority over other people, because there's a lot of ignorant people who are in those families. And so that's his commentary on them, right? So on a trip to the frontier, is a hunting trip, right? He's in a cage and he gets away from them. And then he's plucked up by an eagle and dropped in the ocean. And so he gets through that. He sets sail again, right? And after an attack by pirates, he ends up in Laputa, the floating island inhabited by theoreticians and academics. And they oppress the land below, right, called the Balnibarbi. And so the research they're doing in Laputa and in Balnibarbi is inane, it's impractical, and their residents, the scientists, feel completely out of touch with reality. So he takes a short side trip I'm not even gonna. I'm gonna fuck this up if I even try to say it. So I'm just gonna put it over there in chat. Glubdubdrib. That's what it looks like to me. Glubdubdrib. During that side trip, Gulliver is able to witness the conjuring up of figures from history, such as Julius Caesar and other military leaders and people of import. And he finds these people much less important than they are in history books. Okay, he finds them boring, right? And so he visits two groups of people, the Lugnagians and the Struldbrugs. The latter of which, the Struldbrugs, are senile immortals who are meant to illustrate that age does not bring with it wisdom, right? That they're just absolute stupid people. That they're doing things for the wrong reasons and things of that nature. For after those visits, he's able to set sail for Japan, and from there back to England. And then finally, he sets out as a captain of his own ship, right? But after there's a mutiny, and the crew confines him to his cabin. He arrives in an unknown land, and this is the land populated by the Wenhams, right? And the Yahoos, right? So over a time, he learns their language, right? Of the Wenhams, right? And he's treated with kindness and courtesy and all that stuff. I just found a typo in my own notes. And he wants, like I said, he wants to stay with them, but they determine that he's too much like a Yahoo. He won't breed, so they banish him. So he makes a canoe, right? And paddles his way to a nearby island where he's picked up by a Portuguese ship and captain who treats him well. But Gulliver now sees all humans as shameful and Yahoo-like. So then he makes the claim that he's visited lands that belong to England by rights as colonies, but also begins to question the whole idea of colonialism, right? And that's what moves us from the travel literature and medieval into what's considered to be the Romantics, as he begins to question the idea of colonialism, kind of the tenets of colonialism. Is it moral? That's where he's talking about the Wenhams and the Yahoos and all those folks, because anywhere that the British went, or any country for that matter who has any type of colonies around the world, anywhere they went, they subjugated those people. The first thing they would do is outlaw their language. They would build schools and churches immediately to Christianize them and to get them to speaking, especially with the British, they would get them to speaking English, and they'd make them, cut their hair and dress like them, and they were basically Anglophiling the people that they were colonizing and subjugating. The same thing happened in the United States when the U.S. begins to push in that westward expansion. Every Native American tribe we come across, we relegate them to lands that are undesirable, untenable, and we begin building churches and schools, cutting their hair, doing all that. We did the same thing. That's what colonization is. Colonization is the destroying of other cultures. There's no room for other cultures except for the culture that is the dominant one, and so that's what happens when you have countries that are going and kind of taking over other countries around the world, whether that's for land, whether it's for resources, whatever it is, right? The end result is the same. There are entire languages and entire cultures that have just been wiped off the face of the earth because of the process of colonialization. So that's the plot and kind of the reasoning behind Gulliver's moves and things through the story, and the people he comes across. They're meant to be they're meant to be allegories for different aspects of British society. So I think he does that well, and he does it well enough that the book is well received, and it's read by lots of people, and the British royalty doesn't actually come after his head. So if you're looking for a book that's successful, I think it hits all the check marks. All right.